Got my water on the floor so I don't accidentally fry Phil's computer. There we go. Okay, so Phil gave us a great introduction last week to the whole concept of second mile servants. All lessons that are coming from the Gospel of Matthew. One of the key things I wanted to review that he said was that this whole concept of second mile servants came from a law that the Romans had, that if a Roman soldier approached any citizen, that he could command them to carry his burden for a mile. And so and you can imagine as an ordinary citizen, if you lived, say, in a town like Fayetteville or Jacksonville, and you were constantly coming across Army Rangers or Marines that were marching down the streets, and you had to carry their stuff for a mile, that would be a little bit of an imposition, maybe something you weren't that fond of doing, but the idea that you would not only carry it for a mile, but offer to carry it a second mile is the concept that's being brought across here. The word beatitudes is defined as consummate bliss. And the word blessed, which is used in most of the beatitudes, actually in most of the versions we read, it's in every one of them, blessed, blessed, or blessed. I was going to take a poll to see if anybody under the age of say 60 pronounced it blessed, or if it's just, that, I mean, that was tied with the old King James or something. I don't know whether younger people say that or not, but blessed is the one who does this and that. That word from the Greek has really just two English synonyms, blessed and happy. And you'll see some versions of the Bible or translations of the Bible where happy is used. Not on all of them, but some. And in some it would be sort of counterintuitive to say happy is the man who mourns, for instance. But you'll see that word happy inserted sometimes. So this very first section, the first couple verses says, and seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came to him, and he opened his mouth and taught them, saying. So, and I encourage your comments throughout this whole thing. If I don't see you raise your hand, be sure to speak up. As we go through these beatitudes, think about either examples from your own life that you've seen, maybe another Christian display these virtues, or maybe it reminds you very vividly of another Bible character who displayed this so well in their own life. Those kind of comments would be very helpful. But think of Jesus following his own example or his own command to be a second mile servant. If you went back to Matthew chapter 4, he went through some pretty significant and in our terms would be exhausting events. When he was tempted in the desert, that happened in chapter 4. When he went out and picked up his first few disciples, that was in chapter 4. And then he started this massive campaign of healing, which was a way of giving credibility to what he's saying was true. If somebody can heal you of a deadly disease, then you're probably more likely to listen to what they have to say. The Gospel of John does a great job of tying together the purpose of all those miracles and the fact that they validate the truth of what Jesus's message was. So at the end of all of that, we come into chapter 5, and Jesus, goes up into a mountain. When I go to the mountains, it's to get away from people. I don't know about you, but it's a nice retreat. It's a way you can get some solitude. But the crowds are following him. So it says, when he was set, he begins to teach to them. To me, even that is sort of a second mile servant kind of mentality, that he doesn't miss an opportunity to teach. Sometimes we're exhausted, but we have an opportunity because people are listening to do some teaching, and that's exactly what Jesus did. A few years ago, when Mike Hypes was here, he went through the Beatitudes on, I think it was a Wednesday night adult class in the auditorium, And his challenge was to everybody in the class to memorize the Beatitudes, all 12 verses. And when I was younger, that would have been easy. A few years ago, it was kind of tough. I was teaching a Sunday morning teen class over in the barn, and I told them, I said, for the next couple of weeks, we're going to memorize the Beatitudes, because I figured if they could do it, maybe I could absorb some of their energy and I could do it too. Well, it took them 1 week, it took me 2 weeks, but that was a very doable thing. And at my age, those things don't stick in my head. I recognize the Beatitudes. I can quote several of them out of sequence, but to actually beginning to end quote all 12 verses is a tough thing. Fortunately, I'm not called on to do that very often. So, but these are words really to live by. They're words that can change your life if you really could make them part of your way of living. So let's go on here. Maybe I could get somebody in this. We'll start in the back row. Gail, can you read the? Oh, well, I'll get you, Denise. Gail, why don't you read both of the verses that are up here? Can you see it? Okay.
Blessed are the poor in the spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Okay. Since you're having to look it up, we'll comment on that first, and we'll come to Philippians in a minute. So, as I already said, the Greek word for blessed is translated either as blessed or happy, and some translations use the word happy instead of blessed. But blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. What does poor in spirit mean to you? Sounds like kind of a pretty negative thing, when I first read it. Is it depressed? Humble. Okay, good. I think that's a good substitute. Yes.
Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of the others.
Okay. So right in there comes out that word humble, or derivation of the word humble, humility. Using humility when you're interacting with others, not looking to your own interests, but the interest of others. It would mean to recognize one's need for spiritual help. And these are the people who will accept the kingdom of heaven. That's why they inherit it, is because they accept the fact that they need help with that spiritual part of their lives. Any other comments or connections you see between this and your own personal life or other Bible stories? Then we'll move on. Now, Denise, if you could read this one.
For they will be comforted.
Okay.
Pray to God and Father of the Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comfort us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort that we ourselves receive from God. For just as we share abundantly in the suffering of Christ, so also our comfort abounds through Christ.
Okay. So blessed are those who mourn. I made a note here that it occurred to me that the grieving process is part of healing, part of being able to move on with your life when something happens that causes you to mourn. There can be no happiness in mourning. Therefore, the translation of happy as the man wouldn't fit here. Happy is the one. But when you think about what Jesus, this is fairly early in his ministry that he's giving this speech, this Sermon on the Mount. And what he was beginning to do was roll out a new way of life that was drastically different from the old law that they lived under. And so he's setting the tone for a new way of thinking about life and a new way about thinking of your relationship with God. And what he was setting up was probably the only way to achieve genuine relief from the sorrows of this world. He was giving them something to look forward to no matter what their situation in life was. Any other comments about that, or about mourning in general?
I think there's an essence here also of sort of like the example of Jeremiah. He looked at the spiritual condition of the people around him and he mourned.
Right.
And I think as a child of God, it's good for us to mourn over the conditions of our society and our world. Cause you to have greater concern for it.
Yeah.
When we have greater concern, when we actually mourn for people who don't know God first, that causes our bodies to have the blessing is the Lord.
Thank you for that comment, both of those. The mourning is more or less sets us up for a call to action to do something about it. Sue-Ann, can you see that from there?
Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Let your gentleness be evident to all.
Okay, so the Greek, the Greek word for meek is gentle and mild. I had a note here that, you know, it seems a little bit counterintuitive to me about inheriting the earth when we're focused on a eternal kingdom. But it says, and I don't know if this is literally the word, but the commentary I was reading said that this is the same earth that's referred to in 2 Peter 3:13, which says, in keeping with his promise, we are looking forward to a new heaven and a new earth where righteousness dwells. So it's talking about something beyond this life and this earth that we're living on right now. Any other comments about gentleness and maybe examples you've seen of gentleness that have been particularly meaningful to you?
Gentleness is something that's getting pretty squished out. It always happens right now. Gentle people seem to be taking some pretty bad hits.
Right. Okay.
Society wants to argue every point.
Right.
Every day.
Right. Let's go to the back. Frank, you want to read for us? Go ahead and read the second one too.
Lord, make your love increase and overflow for each other.
The note that I had on the first verse, the one that is in the Beatitudes, was that it brings across the concept of being eager to learn what constitutes a righteous life. A hungry individual not only seeks food, but when he finds it, he consumes it. It's not just like, oh, good, there's food. He actually would consume it. I don't know why this thought popped up in my head, because it's been how many years? 2 years since we've had a potluck here. But have you ever gone to, you know, you come through those doors, you have your plate full of food, and you look for a table, and there's already 2 or 3 people sitting there, and you sit down and start to consume your food. The person that got there first gets to their dessert first. They say, oh, you've got to try this rhubarb pie. I picked that because I like rhubarb pie. Nobody else has ever tasted it. But how many times have you left your main course and run up to the table to get that dessert that somebody else says, you can't miss out on this? You know, that's the kind of infectious, contagious attitude that would be spread by our hunger and thirsting for righteousness. If we're so excited about it that we can't help but share it with other people. Dory gave us a good example of that. You know, a future daughter-in-law setting the example is, would you like to study? And putting some enthusiasm into that is contagious. That was a great example.
Sort of like having Deborah's banana pudding.
There you go. I should have picked banana pudding. I guess.
Well, if you do what I do, you get your dessert.
There you go.
I always get
Well, and that's the person who sets the example, you know? Right. So when we resume those, you bring banana pudding, I'll bring rhubarb pie. We'll see which one wins.
Bring up verse.
Judy, you feel like reading? Can you see that okay? Yeah.
Okay. Blessed are the merciful, they will show mercy. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgive each other, just as in Christ God forgave you.
Okay, in this case, the Greek word for merciful really only has one translation. Mercy is the one English word that fits the Greek word in that case. It means, and switching over to English, that word means to be sparing in inflicting even punishment that is due another. It does not call for endorsing wrong or overlooking it, but to be considerate of the other person. So we run into this all the time in the justice system. We hear about cases, we hear people getting off without any punishment, and sometimes that upsets us that they're not getting the punishment that's due them. But when we put that into the context of second mile servants and what kind of attitude we maybe need to have when thinking about crime and punishment, or just misdeeds and punishment. I hate to almost insert the term crime into that. People, because of their actions, deserve certain outcomes. Where would we all be? What would our hope be if that's the kind of mercy that God, or the lack of mercy, the justice, you might say, that God applied to us? Can we ever be good enough? So likewise, Christ's forgiveness and mercy shown to us is not endorsing our sinfulness. It's not saying it's okay. It's waiving of the punishment that's due. I've heard that the most popular verse in the Bible across not just Christians, but anybody who's read the Bible, whether they're a believer or not, the most quoted verse is, "Judge not that you be not judged." People love that concept. Don't judge. I'm doing something wrong, but don't you dare tell me I'm doing something wrong. Is that the way we're supposed to interpret that?
No.
Okay. Yeah, Jeff.
I think that verse gets out of context because we're not using proper context. I think it's more of don't judge for eternal life. You can't judge. You're
Right.
not that judge.
Right.
I may see you doing all sorts of good works and you're just really trying to sell real estate.
Right.
And, you know, conversely, you see someone else and you don't think well of them. You know, like the widow put in the mighty, well, she didn't give anything. Well, she's giving everything.
Right.
So I don't think it's a don't judge what you do. When people say that, they're like, well, would you mind doing your surgery? Like, you're not a doctor, are you? I'm like, no, but you shouldn't judge.
Right.
So, I mean, I think we are supposed to be full of discernment, but we're not supposed to judge people for eternal life, because we can't.
Right. Yeah, Flash.
Well, I think it tells us that we're not the judge. God is the judge. Also, both in the Old Testament and New Testament, we're told that vengeance belongs to God. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. It's not ours to judge. one another. We're not to be critical.
Well, Jesus expounds on it himself in chapter 6, talking about prayer. Part of prayer is forgive us as we forgive others. And then he explains more at the end of prayer, because if you don't forgive others, you can't expect God to forgive you. But here in Ephesians, it's kind of, forgive others as God has forgiven you. It's see the relationship there between trying to be like God.
Let's face it, if we don't, if we have an unforgiving heart, how can we love? We're to love others. We love God first and then love others to love ourselves. And then if we have an unforgiving heart, it's impossible to do.
Great comments. I want to come back to something that Jeff said. If we put ourselves in the place of the judge, someone's done something wrong. Maybe it's their lifestyle. It could be a number of things. If we put ourselves in the saying, well, that person's going to hell, that person is not worth saving, then we don't share the gospel with them. We don't even give them a chance. There's always a chance, for anybody who's committed any sin. And when we become the judge, we're pronouncing the sentence. We're deciding the outcome of that person's eternal life. Okay, we need to move on here. Renee, you want to read this?
Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Follow God's example, therefore, as dearly loved children, and walk in the way of God, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. But among you there must not be even a hint of sexual immorality or any kind of impurity or impurity, because these are improper for God's holy. Nor would there be obscenity, foolish talk, or coarse joking, which are out of place, but rather.
Okay, great, thank you. So to be pure in heart, to be pure in anything is to be not mixed with other elements. Only one ingredient. If you can think of the Christian life that way, having one purpose, one focus, very, very focused on what's important. The Bible character that came to mind immediately when I read this was David. As a young boy, when he was approached to help his people in terms of fighting Goliath, well, he wasn't approached for that. He came and volunteered for that. But here's a young boy who has a very simple lifestyle. He's a shepherd. He's out there taking care of the sheep. He's even willing to risk his life for the protection of his sheep. So when all of his older brothers are not willing to come forward and do what is being asked to save the people from the Philistines, David doesn't hesitate at all. I'll do it. He seems like the most unlikely candidate to do it, but he has a pure heart. He's focused on God. He worships the true and living God, and his purpose is really just to take care of his sheep, to take care of his fellow man. He's patriotic. He's willing to do what it takes without question, without concern for his own life. But then later in his life, in 2 Samuel, the 11th chapter, the first few verses of that talk about, and I'll start it out and you'll know how it ends. In the spring, in the time when kings go off to war, ... When David takes his focus off of what's pure, what's his life purpose, to serve God, to protect his people, to do what's in the best interest of his people. He's a king now. When he takes his mind off that, does his mind remain pure? He's faced with temptation. He sees a woman bathing on the roof and he's totally thrown off course. You know the rest of the story. But to me, that's a great example of the wrong way to do things. David, all in all, was a man who walked after God's own heart. That's not said about hardly anybody. So he was able to fix it, but the impurity did creep into his life. Let's see, Justin, read for us.
Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Romans 12:17-21. Do not repay anyone for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge, and I will repay, says the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good.
I don't know why, I'm always amused by the last couple of lines of that. In doing good, you're gonna heap coals on your enemy's head, but love your enemy. If you find a lot of conflict in your life, if you're always at odds with other people, you might want to ask yourself, what's causing the conflict? Is it you? If you're the common denominator and everybody you interact with, you have a major conflict with, we maybe need to do some self-examination. Is it you or is it others? But as much as it is possible, live at peace with everybody. Okay, let's keep moving here. We're just about out of time. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. It's important to keep in mind, persecuted because of righteousness. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. This same concept carries on to the next two verses. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. And John 15:18, to just give some balance from another place in the New Testament. If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. I don't think of the fact that I'm at odds with the world in certain things. I don't think I've ever felt hated, but certainly I felt out of place at times because of my beliefs. And we need to keep in mind that all the prophets went through the same thing. I wanted to kind of end with, I'm not going to read the passage because it's too long, but I think of the faith chapter in Hebrews 11 and also the way that Hebrews 12 starts out. Hebrews 11 says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And then there's a long laundry list giving the reasons why all these different characters in the Bible that we teach our children about and that we all know by heart, how they were examples of faith, how they were examples of second mile servants, if you will. You know, I'm just going to read off their names that are mentioned in that chapter: Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Rahab, Gideon, Barak, Samson, David, Samuel. And if you think about what is the benefit of living life by these beatitudes, what is the benefit of going through your life with the mentality of a second mile servant? I kind of picture this as what it's going to be like entering the gates of heaven one day after the judgment. Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which does so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. We are truly blessed. And I could kind of picture, I don't know how I'll recognize Moses and Sarah and Abraham and Gideon. Samson, I think I'll recognize, he'll be bulked up. But the fact that we will come in contact with those people, great examples of faith, great examples of the same kind of mentality we're talking about here in the Beatitudes, and realize that well done, good and faithful servant applies to us because of the way that we've chosen to live our lives. Any final comments? If not, we are dismissed, and see you all in worship.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.